Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings was an absolute stud last season. If it wasn't for Alvin Kamara going off on Christmas Eve when he had like 6 touchdowns or something like that, Dalvin Cook was the runaway number 1 player in fantasy football up until like the last 2 weeks. And he missed 2 games as well. So Nick, Cook last season, 312 carries, over 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns. His more or less this season is 1,380.5 yards. How are you feeling about that?
Man, this one's really, really difficult. Dalvin Cook was fantastic last year. I vividly remember him running all over the Green Bay Packers in one of those mid-season matchups, the only NFC North game, I believe, that Green Bay dropped. I mean, he's unbelievable. And the stats last year were ridiculous. Like you said, only 14 games, over 111 yards per game. You project that out. I mean, he would have been sniffing at 2,000 yards, probably wouldn't have got there, but would have been in striking distance had he played 2 more games. And I mean, talk about a guy who passes the eye test too. I mean, it's noticeable, how much better he is than the league average running back. The speed with which he hits the hole, the vision. He's the complete total package at this point. Almost 100 catches over the last 2 seasons as well. He's right up there with Alvin Kamara, with Christian McCaffrey as some of these most versatile backs in the NFL. This number is a little bit conservative relative to where he was last year. Like you said, 1,557 is a number he finished at in 14 games. He could potentially play 17 games in this season. And this number is, almost 200 yards fewer than what he finished with in 14 games last year. So it feels like, you're kind of being pushed toward the over here. But at the same time, Dalvin Cook also missed a couple games in 2019. He only played 11 games in 2018 when he was kind of the partial starter. So there are some injury concerns here, and that's certainly baked into the number.
Yeah, he's never played a full season in his NFL career, but he is one of the more consistent guys across the league when he does play. Only Derrick Henry averaged more yards per game than Dalvin Cook the last 2 years. Cook's averaging 96 yards a game. So if he plays and he's healthy, I think he's a pretty safe bet to hit the more here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't feel super comfortable steering you toward the under, just because I feel like at that point you're betting on an injury. It's pretty hard to come up with any like rationale that you'd feel great about for a reason that Dalvin Cook's going to play 17 games. And he's going to go under this number. It's like, is he just going to massively regress? Is the Minnesota offense just really going to struggle relative to last season? Neither of those things seem overly likely. Maybe they're a little bit more reliant on the passing game. But even so, I mean, if you believe that Dalvin Cook can stay healthy for even 15 games, you think he has a great chance to go over that number.
Yeah, and with the Vikings as well, they're gonna rely on Cook as their bell cow. As you just mentioned, their passing game. A lot of people are liking big years or more, taking that next step for guys like Irv Smith Jr. at tight end. You got Justin Jefferson, who was a monster as a rookie last year. People think he's only going to get better, and then you always got Adam Thielen too. But the big but with the Minnesota Vikings is their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who I think is a bit of an idiot. The dude. Regardless of what you think about vaccines, the guy says, he's not getting vaccinated. He's going to put himself in a bubble. And I think that's only going to lead to problems down the road. So I think that just means more carries and more touches for Dalvin Cook as we go throughout this NFL season. But does that passing game with some of those guys I just mentioned, does that scare you at all when it comes to this number for Cook?
Not necessarily. I mean, as an aside, the Kirk Cousins, like I might just kind of surround myself in like a makeshift like phone booth at all times was an all-time quote. I don't know if that got enough play for like how ridiculous and like how sincere that was. Like rather than getting this vaccine, I will just like surround myself in plexiglass for the next 18 weeks. That he didn't catch as much heat for that as he should have. I'm not really too concerned about it. I mean, when you look at Kirk Cousins' career numbers, like he had 35 touchdowns last year. He threw for 266 yards per game. That was his highest, since his days in Washington. So it's not like this passing game wasn't operational last year and you're expecting this big bounce. Dalvin Cook found a way to be extremely productive with the passing game, also being relatively productive last year. So if anything, I would say there's a chance that Kirk Cousins as a quarterback maybe regresses a bit. He probably doesn't get to 35 touchdowns again, but the talent around him, also could carry him. But with that said, no, to answer your original question, no, I don't think the passing game is going to be like so wildly productive that it causes Minnesota to go away from the run.
Yeah. And, when it comes to Kirk Cousins quotes, this whatever he said this summer doesn't compare to last year when at the height of the pandemic, when talking to the media, he said, if I die, I die. So Kirk Cousins, there you go. Always.
He's not wrong.
Yeah. So Kirk Cousins likes to keep you entertained.